Friends, if I could have your attention for just a moment. At this time, we are going to begin the memorial services for Rick Friedman. If you have a cell phone or a pager, I would ask, encourage, and even invite you to turn it off or place it in the silent mode. Officiating today's services will be read by Rachel Weiss and Cantor Howard Friedland. And if there are some of you in the crowd today that have an extra service folder or wouldn't mind sharing, I'd be happy to borrow a couple of those. Thank you so much, just to make sure that all the members of the family have them. Thank you, Rev.
Good morning, everyone. For many of us, the last time we saw Rick, including the last time that Carol saw Rick, was right here in this room on Sunday evening. It was right here in this space, sitting at a round table filled with puns and humor and laughter and singing and jokes and food and community with their arms around each other, singing together in the ways that Rick loved to be here best, most importantly with everyone. And so it feels most important to begin today by asking this very important question, which you all can probably answer because you've probably heard it many times, which is to say, why do seagulls live by the sea? Because if they lived by the bay, they'd be bagels. If you hadn't had the blessing and the privilege of hearing Rick tell that joke 1 or 2 or 25 times, there were probably a few others that you'd had the blessing of experiencing. Because that's who Rick was. And this moment feels a little bit hard to believe, even though there is a way in which we knew this was a possibility in Rick's life and in our community's life. For Rick's body was fragile. And so we are here today as a community to mourn and to be together and to surround his beloved family and all of us as his community with great love as we mourn in sadness and in tears and also in laughter and love the death of our beloved Rick Friedman, the husband of Carol Neubauer Friedman, the son of the late Kay and Howard Friedman, the brother of David Friedman and Beth Friedman, the brother-in-law of Sarah Phillips, of David Neubauer and Jean Crum, of Adlai Neubauer and Carol Trowbridge Neubauer, of Agnes and Jonathan Hartstein, the father of Aaron and Gabriel and Daniel, the father-in-law of Elisha and Thúy-Lan and Kiandokht, the Papa Rick of Reggie and Zeb and Rose and Levi and Noa, the uncle of Alex and Adam and Jesse, Eliza, Ariella, and Orly, cousin of Vanessa and Michelle, Rob, Philip and Susan, Debbie and Eric, and the Hirsch family, the nephew of Michael, and our beloved friend. There are so many ways that we are connected to Rick, and so many hearts that are broken wide open. And so we begin this ritual of levaya, of accompanying. You will notice that Rick's body is not here with us today. And the circumstances of his death are not exactly known to us in this moment. We know that he died on Wednesday. We don't exactly have all of the answers, and that is part of what is traumatic and hard. But what we do know is that this ritual that we do together, this word that we use of accompaniment, of levaya, while sometimes we use it to accompany a body to its resting place of burial, we also use to accompany each other in the process of grief and mourning. Because no one in our tradition, we say, should mourn alone. So I want to ask Rick's family, who are wearing Kriya ribbons, the black ribbons of mourning, to stand, to rise in your body or in your spirit, in your hearts, as we tear these ribbons, as we say, Baruch Dayan Ha'emet, we acknowledge Adonai Natan of Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach. Blessed is the one who gives and who takes, and whose name is blessed forever. And you will come to help tear the ribbons, or you may tear them yourselves. These words, as Cantor Howard joins us to sing from Ecclesiastes, the book of Kohelet.
Nor holech v'nor ba, v'ha'aretz l'olam omadet. יזרח השמש ובא השמש, ואל מקומו שואף, זורחו שם. הולך אל דרום, וסובב אל צפון, סובב סובב הולך הרוח, לסביבותיו שבה רוח. כל הנחלים הולכים אל הים, והים איננו מלא אל מקום, שהנחלים הולכים שם הם שבים ללכת.
A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises, the sun sets, and glides back to where it rises again. Southward blowing and turning northward, ever turning blows the wind. On its rounds, the wind returns. All streams flow into the sea, but the sea is never full. To the place from which they flow back there again. On Friday, as over a dozen members of the Neubauer and Friedman family gathered together, we talked and said, this feels like we have been here before. That the trauma of this sudden moment of Rick's death feels a little bit like the trauma of 2002, after Rick's accident, when so many of you gathered, both in this sanctuary and in the old JRC sanctuary and in Carol and Rick's home and in your homes and in St. Francis Hospital and the Rehab Institute of Chicago and in all sorts of places and spaces to care for the Friedman family in shock. How could this happen? In this moment of not knowing, and that this moment feels a little bit like we are thrown back into this place. We were just sitting here in this sanctuary, sitting at a table, eating hamantashen with Rick. Part of being in community with Rick was to know that he would tell us lots of jokes. He would tell all of the stories about the times he listened to every Bruce Springsteen's song or went to every concert, over 20 of them, or met him that one time, or every Cubs game, or the time that he got to tell the joke to Ernie Banks, which later you'll get to hear him tell in the slideshow. And more importantly, all of the connections that he had. Rick had a story about everything. Every devar that somebody gave at the Minyan, he had a story to tell. Everything. He had a joke. He had a comment. He would come up after every single service and say, "Did I tell you about the one?" And most of us, even though, yes, of course, he told us about the one, and he told us again and again, said, "Of course, tell me about that." It was complicated, and it was complicated after Rick's accident to stay and to be with him. It was complicated for him to have patience. It was complicated for us to have patience. But there was so much love for this community and for Rick, for his family, and for being with people. And so this day is an opportunity for us to collect in the way that Rick collected stories and jokes and songs and lyrics and people, to collect our memories into a place of realizing that he's not going to use his cane to push the button to open the door anymore downstairs, or roll himself into the corner, or be here with us. For someone whose presence in this community and in this room and in your lives loomed so very large and so very deep. We don't exactly know what it will feel like, but we know what it feels like right now. And we know what it feels like to be in this room that is full of love and tears and a lot of disbelief, and to be full of your family. Carol, this incredible family of yours that Rick loves so much, that you love so much, and this whole room that is here to hold us and to hold you. The 23rd Psalm in our tradition is about understanding and recognizing that fear of loneliness and that fear of the unknown. 22 years ago, when Rick had his accident, there was so much unknown, whether it was the unknown of coma or of recovery or of what that would look like for the rest of his life or for your family. And gradually and slowly, with the accompaniment of so many in this room, and with his children, and with his siblings, with his parents, with his beloved Carol, he came to lean on lots of different people and on himself and his own determination. This psalm, the 23rd, talks about the ways that we lean on the source that gives us our own sense of power and powerlessness as we make it through and face the reality of mortality and the reality of hoping that we will one day be in a place fully supported with an overflowing cup of blessings.
מזמור לדוד, Habonim לא לחסר, ינות בשילביצני, על מנוחות ינח עליני, נפשי שובב ושובב, ינחני ומעט לצדק, ינחני ומעט לצדק, למען שמו. קום כי הלך בגץ על מוות, לא יירא כי אתה עמדי, שבטך ומשענתך המה ילנחמוני. ברוך לפני, לפני, שולחן נגד צורריי. נשענת לשמן ראשי, חוסי רוויה. אך טוב החסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. אדוני רואי לא אחסר, אדוני רואי לא אחסר.
The Eternal is my shepherd, I shall never be in need. Amid the choicest grasses does God set me down. God leads me beside the calmest waters and restores my soul. God takes me along paths of righteousness in keeping with the honor of God's name. Even should I wander in the valley of the darkest shadows, I will fear no evil. You are with me, God. Your power and support are there to comfort me. You set in front of me a table in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup is overflowing. Surely goodness and loving kindness will follow me all the days of my life, and I shall come to dwell inside the house of the Eternal for a length of days. We will hear from a variety of family and friends this morning to share memories and reflections and eulogies. And we'll begin by inviting Rick's very dear friend, Jeff Winter, to share some of your memories and stories.
It was on a Shabbat morning around 1992 when my wife Sally and I first came to try out the Minyan here at JRC. That morning, we had the good fortune to meet Rick and Carol, two people who embodied and continue to embody the caring and accepting spirit of this vibrant and wonderful community. I'll always remember that Rick and I sat next to each other during services that morning, and we casually schmoozed a bit. And in those years, the group met in a classroom. And I happened to notice that a student had flung a sharpened pencil up into the ceiling. And it was just hanging there vertically, and I mentioned to Rick, boy, I wonder if that could fall on somebody's head. He said, no, don't worry, that's the eternal pencil. Well, of course I cracked up, and we bonded over that silly moment, and we became friends for the next 30-odd years. Eternal friends from the inspiration of the eternal pencil. Over the years, Rick and I enjoyed many simple but transcendent pleasures just by hanging out, being buddies. We could talk about just about anything. We shared a lot of interests, seeing concerts, meeting for lunch, or just having a chat on the phone. Once, Rick remarked to me that if I only golfed, I'd be the perfect friend. Well, I didn't take up golf, but we did okay. It says in Pirkei Avot, "Aseh lecha rav u'knei lecha chaver," get yourself a teacher and acquire a friend. Well, Rick certainly was a very important friend to me, but he also turned out to be one of the great teachers of my life. How was that? Well, after Rick's accident, some people in that situation might have given up hope, wallowed in self-pity, gone into serious depression or worse. But not Rick. He taught me, and many others, no doubt, that even when a person is dealt a seemingly impossible hand in life, it's vital to find the tools that we have and to develop some new ones in order to make the best of whatever remaining years were granted. Rick was filled with spirit of love and loyalty and joy. As we heard so beautifully, so eloquently from Rabbi Rachel, he loved to gather with others. He loved his family here at Shul, the larger family, visiting with childhood friends from Habonim and other places, celebrating with relatives, and joyfully welcoming new friends, including those he may have just met 5 minutes ago in line at Jewel. Rick's dedication was seen to me early on, when my father-in-law of blessed memory died, and he was the only person who drove on a very frigid day to Racine, to the cemetery there for the burial. And it really meant a lot to my wife and me that he did that. It was the kind of person he was. Rick and I would go to special events together, like we went to a Springsteen concert, Cubs game, the Goodman, very recently to see Tommy at his initiative, local restaurants, parks, and in doing these things, I got to witness a little bit, just a little bit, of all of the effort that went into Rick going to these kinds of events. But you know what? He never complained. He didn't make a big deal out of the inconveniences. He just wanted to enjoy special moments with friends. Rick really was one of my most important teachers. From Rick, I learned patience, dedication, and caring from a man who would move heaven and earth to spend an evening with a friend or a loved one. About a year ago, Rick and his oldest son, Aaron, and I, we went to the North Shore Center for Performing Arts to see one of his favorite comedians, Stephen Wright. Now, Rick probably could have gotten on stage and recited the whole act. He knew all of Stephen Wright's lines. But we just had a great time, our little group of 3, and it was just emblematic of how much joy Rick could find in any event that came his way. I know I speak for Rick's friends and acquaintances here today and on Zoom that we are honored to have had Rick along our life journeys. We're richer for having been in his circle. And as we all know, his passing was so unexpected, so sudden. I regret not being able to say goodbye to him in person. And to tell him how much I loved him and was grateful for his friendship. Now, Rick had a special quality. He would quote poetry, which often was in the form of song lyrics, when the Spirit moved him. And of course, we all know 2 of his favorite sources for lyrics were Paul Simon and Bruce Springsteen, and I don't think I will ever be able to listen to songs by either of them again without having some thoughts of how much Rick enjoyed their music, their songwriting. He was a major singer-songwriter guy. Now, I'm sorry if other people also do it. I have to include one quote from Bruce Springsteen. He once said the following: "Greetings, creatures of Earth, fellow New Jerseyans, citizens of Mars, fans, friends, and listeners from coast to coast and around the world. Welcome to Waiting on a Friend. There's no friendship in the world like a rock and roll friendship. Music is the unspoken language of companionship. When you find that soulmate who understands every note, every syllable of every lyric of every song that ever ripped a hole in your heart, you know you've found a friend for life. You are bonded forever through the magic, the mystery, and the miracle of rock and roll. Rick would have loved hearing that quote today. And we also know that Rick was so fond of a quote from a 19th century French Quaker abolitionist missionary, Etienne de Grelais. It's actually on the back of his calling card that he would hand out to people, and was available up here, but people on Zoom haven't seen the card, but I'm sure many of you have heard it often. And it was one of those sayings that I never, ever got tired of hearing. And one of those sayings that I also have tried to commit to memory. And I wish I could hear Rick say it today. It says there, "I shall pass this way but once. Any good that I can do, or any kindness I can show to any human being, let me do it now. Let me not defer nor neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again." For Rick's family, may you be comforted among the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. Thank you, Rick, for being my friend.
Rick and Carol collected many wonderful friends from many different places. Not long before Rick's accident, Carol began teaching at ETHS, and many colleagues and friends continued to be part of their lives. And I want to invite Ron Coulter, who has continued to be part of Rick and Carol's life, to come and share a bit about your friendship and your relationship with Rick as you remember your dear friend. Pastor Ron, please come join us.
I'm going to say good morning. I'm not familiar with how things go in a service like this, but I have to be who I am. And I intend to just share a few moments with you all. And one of the things I'm going to do before I do that, good morning, Carol. I'm going to put on my cheaters and not pretend like I can still see like I used to years ago. So I want to just say greetings to you all. I know this is not a time that one can always say they'll be joyous, but I will say that by those that I see here right now, I can see that Rick and Carol were loved very, very deeply. And I came to know Rick and Carol 22 plus years ago from ETHS, because that's where I met Dr. Carol Friedman, who I call Carol now. I still call her Dr. Friedman. And they were both encouragers to me. And though Rick and I have never gone out to lunch together, we talked over the phone often. Rick was very knowledgeable, and when I had questions about securities or mutual funds and things like that, Rick was always willing to share his knowledge and to encourage me that I could do it, because I was going to take an exam. And I really appreciated that. Not too long after many conversations, Dr. Carol Friedman informed me that Rick had been in an accident and was in the hospital. And I asked her if it was okay if I came to the hospital where he was at to pray for him. And she was fine with that. And Carol and I had many, many wonderful conversations together. And I really appreciated what Rick did for me. He never put me down, never looked down on me because I didn't know some of the things he knew. That told me that he would be a very, very good friend. And Rick always showed his love for God through his kindness and his willingness, and I would say to help me. I didn't know about all of you all here. I know that he knew who you all were, and you all had the opportunity to experience his love for humanity and for each one of you. Carol would help me also with particular course because I decided to go to college late. And in my going, Dr. Carol Friedman willingly offered herself to say, Ron, you're gonna come to my room anytime and I'll get you through some of these things. I'll share some knowledge with you that will help you get through. All I wanted to do, I was in my late 50s when I decided to go back to college. My kids were grown, nobody at home, just me and my wife. And I said, I'm gonna go to school. And all I did was, at least I told Carol, I don't care about much of anything else. I just want to graduate. I want to go to school, I want to graduate. And I told Carol, I asked my daughter, Elisha, I said, what do I have to do to graduate? And she said, Dad, sit in the front of the class, take plenty of notes, and ask questions. I didn't know that following that advice would get me to graduate with honors. And I did just that. But here's the thing. Even through all my challenges of going through school, I was always afraid that I would be there because I'm going to go there with a lot of young people. And even though I worked with a lot of young people for 25 years at the high school, that was different from being in a classroom with them. And I didn't want to be embarrassed because I didn't know, or, I didn't know how people would act. But even at that time, Rick and Carol encouraged me to let me know that you can do it. And I was glad for that. And I gotta say that even though I would call Carol from different times over the course of years, they came to my graduation. Out of all the people, she and Rick came to my graduation. And I really appreciated them being there. And at the time, I just finished having surgery, knee replacement at that. So it was hard to sit down, it was hard to stand up. And I had to go across the stage with a walker. But I didn't care because that's what I wanted to do. And I remember Carol, when I talked with her, and even though I can't tell you all the conversations that I had with Rick, but I know we had quite a few. But I can tell you what I had conversations with about Carol. I won't tell the secret stuff. But I will tell you that, no, it was good because I remember her even telling me of when she first became a grandmother. And I was happy for her. And I asked her how was Rick taking all of that. And she always had something kind. She never told me that Rick was downhearted or there was a problem. And I appreciate that. She never put her husband down because there are people that will do that, but she wasn't. And all I have to say is that I remember this, that when Carol called me and told me that Rick had gone on to be with the Lord, I could tell her, there's no words that you can always say to comfort anyone at that time. And sometimes it's best to just keep your mouth closed and just, I guess, do like some people just mourn with her, rejoice with her, be sad with her, cry with her, if that be the case. And I asked Carol, I said, Carol, how are you doing? How are you holding up? And she said to me, it hasn't sunk in yet. I understand. I think we all have lost someone we love. But if there's anything I want to leave with Carol and her family, it is this. With her children, her grandchildren, extended family and friends, that the scriptures tell me to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. And I believe that Rick, through his faithfulness and service to the Lord and to others, he would also be saying this: I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Finally, there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give to me on that day. And not to me only, but also to all those who love his appearing. Family and friends, the scripture says this: his anger is but for a moment. His favor is for life. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy does come in the morning. Remember that our future is just a memory to God. He already knows, and he's already there. And you just lean on him, trust in him, and he is the God of comfort, the Lord of glory, the God of all comfort. And all means all. And that's all means.
Thank you so much. Blessings to you, Pastor Vaughn. We're so grateful for your words and your memories. And I don't know if you noticed that Pastor Vaughn is carrying an ETHS Evanston in Hebrew hat in his hand. Because once an Evanstonian, always an Evanstonian.
That's right. And I just want to say, people have looked at me with this hat on strange, and I said to them, it says Evanston.
It says Evanston. In all the languages we come in all different flavors of all different ways of being, but that love and devotion in all the ways we pray and all the ways that we are connected, which is so much of what Rick embodied. Rick's daughter-in-law, Kiandokht, who is right now celebrating Nowruz in Iran with her family, and is unable to be here. It's the first time she's able to celebrate the New Year with her family in 10 years, and is so sad to not be here in this moment. Sent this text to Carol, which she asked me to share. To my beloved family, I am truly sorry I cannot be there with you today to say goodbye to Papa Rick. When offering their condolences, some have been saying he's in a better place. I never know what that means or where that place is. I do know this, though. He is with us everywhere and all the time. I am going to see him every time I look into David and Beth's eyes. When I see Aaron and Gabriel being the amazing fathers that they are, I see him in Zev's gentle curiosity, in Rosie's fierceness, in Benji's innocence, in Lev's wit and humor, and Noah's beautiful smile. I see him in Carol's strength, patience, and commitment to the family. I'll see him every day in the loving and kind man that Daniel is. He's with me every time I play backgammon, and every time I see my own dad, I am reminded of Rick's unconditional love for me. So I don't know where this better place is that he may be, but he is always with us through his love and memories. So we now welcome Rick's brother, David, to share your memories of your brother.
Thank you, Rabbi, and thank you to everyone who was here to celebrate the life of my brother Rick. He would have just loved this room. There are times when life makes no sense at all, where confusion is the keynote, and all we do is run in ever-tightening circles. That 1 and 1 is 2, school gets closed. then nothing comes out even. Losing my only brother just doesn't add up. I was never very good at math. I haven't taken a math course since a traumatic algebraic incident in my sophomore year of high school. An event so scarring that just hearing the words quadratic equation triggers a mild panic. But Rick lived through an equation none of us could have solved. And somehow, he made the answer look simple. He was a lefty, already living in a right-handed world. Then came the injury and life took his left side entirely. But somehow, Rick stayed more balanced than most of us. He used to say, life's not fair. And then he'd look at you and grin that smile that could light up a room and add, well, either is math if you don't show your work. And Rick, he showed his work every single day. Through patience and unbelievable stubbornness, kindness, and that crooked smile that let you know he was still in there, still finding ways to laugh, adding humor to as many moments as possible to help heal the pain of all our broken lives. Even when life tried to subtract from him, Rick found a way to multiply joy anyway. That's math we can all learn from. And oddly enough, when it comes to grappling with the incomprehensible, like the loss of my brother, someone I've never known life without, I find that math does help. Numbers can give structure to the unacceptable. Sorry. Rick was born on September 15th, 1960, when I was just over 13 months old. That means he was alive exactly 64 years, 6 months, and 4 days, which works out to 3,367 weeks and 2 days, or 23,571 days. And yes, I double-checked the math. He had one life divisible by 2. One wife that added in a strong continuity. 3 children that grew up faster than was mathematically rational. And 5 grandchildren that added in more and more joy to his life. That's a life. Rick's life. He lived 15,398 of those days as an able-bodied person with an intact brain. Then on November 2nd, 2002, he experienced a traumatic brain injury that changed everything for him and for everyone who loved him. That gave us 8,173 post-accident days with Rick. A second lifetime in a way. That's the math. Those are the facts. And while most of us do our best to avoid thinking about our own mortality, typically only considering it during life events like funerals and doctor visits, Rick had jokes for both of those, of course. The truth is, we don't know how long we have. I spent 4.5 days with Rick very recently. We went shopping, we organized his new living space. We saw family, friends, and ate some good meals, and we talked about life and the future, and when I headed back to Portland, we agreed we'd talk on the phone every day, and he made me promise I'd get a haircut. A promise I kept. But then I couldn't reach him for a couple days, and I started to worry. Rick was mostly self-sufficient. Despite the constant challenge of life after his injury, being paralyzed on the left side of your body when you've always been left-handed is a cruel joke from the universe. And add to that, the executive function hurdles from a brain injury in daily life becomes a complex, unsolvable word problem. But Rick did his best. I thought he was extraordinary. We connected every day by sharing our Wordle puzzles. It was one way to check up on him. When he hadn't done the Wordle by the time I woke up in the morning, that was usually an indication that there was something to worry about. So if I couldn't reach him by phone and he hadn't done the Wordle, it meant something could be wrong. But finally, that day, Rick called and explained that he was switching phone carriers, and that's why I hadn't been able to reach him. He was trying to save a few bucks. The guy couldn't pass up a good deal even if he didn't need it. We had a great conversation, our last, it turned out, on Monday, while he was on the bus coming from the Chicago Mitzvah Project. He told me about the Purim celebration right here at JRC the night before, how much he enjoyed it, and the events happening that day at the Mitzvah Project and at his new home in Lincolnwood Place. He was involved. He also talked about how excited he was for Gabriel's graduation in Boston this June, that he was going to see Aaron and his grandkids soon, and that Daniel had just arrived home from his trip abroad. He was connected. He sounded fine, but it was a struggle to hear well over the background noise of a city bus. Then Tuesday came and I couldn't get a hold of him again. I'll admit I was starting to get frustrated. On Wednesday morning, I got a call from his life monitoring service saying they hadn't been able to reach him that morning. I tried calling him again and it went straight to voicemail. I was just finishing up my voicemail message to him when Gabriel called to tell me that Rick had been found dead that morning. I was in shock. I was standing in the dog park. And this force of nature, this survivor of the unsurvivable, this man who boasted he had given 110% to his rehabilitation, which, by the way, is mathematically impossible, was gone. Just gone. Our lives are finite, absurdly, terrifyingly, and sometimes insultingly short. To get philosophical for a minute, it might be the not knowing how long we have that makes life feel meaningful. Sometimes I find that idea motivating. Other times I waste entire afternoons wondering what I walked into a room for. But when someone so deeply important to you is suddenly gone, the time you no longer get to spend with them feels tragic. It's an ending within our lives. And life does go on, indifferently, differently. more hollow, more uneven, like someone changed the equation without telling you. It feels worse without Rick here. So I think about the fact that he no longer feels pain and suffering, and he's just out of time. But we still get to take our time. Our time with mourning, with remembering, with laughing at the jokes we were sick of hearing 100 times and would gladly, joyfully hear 1,000 more. Grief is, after all, just love that no longer has a place to go. So it lingers and it aches, and that's okay. We thought we lost Rick 8,177 days ago. That tragic accident turned a mostly normal, loving Jewish family into survivors of something far bigger than we ever signed up for. The ripples of that moment stretched across all our lives. And yet Rick made the best of it. We all tried to. And now with his passing, the pain shifts back to us. And again, we do what Rick did. We make the best of it. Now, Rick always credited me with introducing him to his rock and roll hero, Bruce Springsteen. And it's true, I evangelized for the boss in 1979 when Rick came back from his year on Kibbutz Ginnigar and started at Bradley University. That said, full credit belongs to Brian Schaefer, a fellow Habonim camper who literally sat me down in the middle of his second floor dorm room in Allen Hall and turned me on to Springsteen during my freshman year at the U of I. I've tried to find Brian online to thank him properly, but he seems to have vanished into the mist like a guitar solo at a New Jersey bar. If you ever enjoyed Rick's intense Springsteen fandom, you can really thank Brian. But I had no idea how far Rick would take it. Carol estimates he went to 28 concerts or more. Some of the ticket prices made me choke. But he always knew what it was worth to him. Only 3 of those concerts were with me. One just before his accident in Chicago. One a year later in Milwaukee, his first big outing after rehab. And one 2 years ago, when he flew to Portland to see Bruce with me again. He loved that night. He had this game where he tried to name the song after just a few notes. And when he got it right, he lit up like the scoreboard at Wrigley Field after a Cubs Grand Slam home run. Rick had an exceptional memory, even after his brain injury. He could recall trivia, lyrics, and jokes better than most people, and he knew it was a gift, and a gift is to be shared. Me, I forget what I had for lunch. I was the perfect audience for his recycled routines. I could hear the same joke a dozen times and laugh like it was new. I'm sure many of you know his greatest hits, like the story of the introduction cards that I made for him that he carried to help meet people. The card came with a rehearsed script, and like any good comic, he knew how to land the bits. The content of the cards was 100% Rick. And the quote he chose by William Penn, which was shared with us before, was his manifesto. And he lived his life by it. Our Habonim Chaver, David Newmark, wrote that Rick was the only person who could complete any joke you started. One of his favorite games, give me the punchline, I'll tell you the joke. Rick loved talking to people, anyone. David Newmark also shared this story. When he offered to help Rick up some steps, Rick shot back, "It's only 2 steps, I can fall by myself." That was Rick. Fiercely independent, comedically defiant, and he did not have patience for Good Samaritans. Rick always knew what was funny, and he told me so frequently. His favorite comedians were Jerry Seinfeld and Stephen Wright, a few of Rick's favorite Wright singers. I intend to live forever. So far, so good. It's a small world, but I wouldn't want to paint it. Everywhere is walking distance, if you have the time. And perhaps the most ironic one for today, I'm not afraid of death. I just don't want to be there when it happens. Rick lived like a man who knew time was precious, even if he didn't always keep track of it in the way the rest of us did. His life didn't follow a typical formula, but somehow the solution he arrived at was joy, connection, family, persistence, and laughter. In the end, even with the variables none of us asked for, he found his own kind of balance, his own way of showing the work, his own way of loving people with everything he had left and then some. He may be gone, but his impact, that's exponential. I'm not a good singer, even though I wish I could belt it out like Springsteen, but to close, I want to share a Rick-adapted version of a Bruce Springsteen song that feels right and that I know Rick would appreciate and would most definitely tear up at. The road is long and seeming without end. The days go on. I remember you, my brother and my friend. And though you've gone, and my heart's been emptied, it seems, I'll see you in my dreams. I got your Springsteen poster here by your bed, all your favorite records and all the books that you read. And though my soul feels like it's split at the seams, I'll see you in my dreams. I'll see you in my dreams. When all our sleepy, hollow summers have come to an end, I'll see you in my dreams. We'll meet and live and laugh again. I'll see you in my dreams, yeah, up around Lake Michigan, for death is not the end. And I'll see you in my dreams. So for me, what remains is nothing but gratitude that you were in my life. Thank you, brother.
Aaron will come and share some memories and reflections that you've gathered from you and also your brothers Gabriel and Dan.
On behalf of our family, thank you so much for coming to JRC to honor the memory of Rick, our dad, at what's truly the most fitting location possible. It isn't fair to call JRC our family's second home, but rather our home 1B, because at many times over the past 37 years, this community has been a lifeline to Rick and our family. Rabbi Rachel and Jeff and David talked about this too, but this week evoked memories of the suddenness of Dad's 2002 accident. And at that time, JRC was also a lifeline to help us get through the aftermath of that accident. And over the next weeks and months, the JRC community rallied around us to provide car rides, meal trains, prayers, and endless support. Words aren't enough to do justice to how close to death Dad was. And Dad's accident and recovery fueled a ton of motivation for my brothers and me, inspiring my brothers to go into medicine, and 1,000 other inspirations in this room, both big and small. Rick was an incredible motivator, but it also cut both ways, as he was incredibly motivating. He was incredibly motivated by not just my brothers and me, but also by our extended family and friends, because we all needed him. Showing up was such an incredibly huge part of my dad's ethos, and this was something he inherited from his parents, Kay and Howard. Not too long before the accident, I had finished my freshman year of football, and my dad had asked me if there were days that I didn't want to go to practice. I was taken aback by the question, but I did answer, in fact, that there were days that I did not want to go to practice, but did anyway. And my dad responded, "Good, because part of life is showing up when you weren't excited to do so." He went to great lengths to attend graduations despite debilitating injuries. When I finished my master's degree at Northwestern, he had recently hurt his shoulder, but he was still committed, and he was in bed most of the time, but he was still committed to being at the graduation. And it took him hours to get dressed and ready, but he made it because he knew how important it was to be there. And Dad was really that guy in terms of building and maintaining relationships with people. Like his mom, Kay, he had an innate ability to stay connected to people, and he made friends easily through his engaging personality and jokes. When I was 23 and I got my first full-time job at North Shore, he would tell people that I was the chief of surgery just to have fun with people. When Elisha met Rick for one of the first times, he told her that one of his favorite jokes, the kugel joke, where the kugel is saved for the shiva. And as we say goodbye to my dad, there will be homemade kugel at the shiva. Thank you, Elisha. And please stay, everyone, to honor my dad's memory and come to the shiva right here. Dad really leaned into our interest to use them as a bonding experience. We all loved going to the annual Cubs convention with him, and during the conventions, he would teach us his sales skills as part of the convention. During one of the Cubs conventions, he gave Daniel a blank baseball to dart into the crowd and get autographs from the players because he knew Daniel was so small and he could dart through and get the autographs, and they weren't going to sign for this grown man. And then in another episode, during a kids Q&A session, my dad convinced me in front of a whole ballroom to use the Q&A to ask Kerry Wood for an autograph. And he, in the middle of the packed ballroom, and he turned over and said to me, "What's the worst that it could happen?" He just will say, "Not now." And so I did it. But I love the memories that he carved out with us. As a teen, I got hooked on Northwestern football and basketball, and because of that, Dad became a Wildcat fan too. And he would listen to the games on WGN radio on his own time, so we had something that we could bond over. And throughout the rest of his life, he invited me to games at Ryan Field. He took great pride in being able to buy, if anyone's ever been to an event with him, they know this. He took great pride in being able to buy handicapped accessible seats. He would say, "It's not sold out until I say it is." As an adult, once I had my own car, we used it to travel to several Northwestern football road games once a year for several years. Our first trip was to Ann Arbor to see Northwestern play at Michigan Stadium. By halftime, he turned to me and he said, "If I hear Hail to the Victors one more time, I'm going to have a stroke." I'm going to miss hearing his exaggerated complaining. We also went to Notre Dame where we saw Northwestern win. And we went to Lincoln, Nebraska, which was yet another not easy trip that Dad took to have that experience together. And just 2.5 years ago, he went to Turkey for Daniel's wedding. There's just no way he was going to miss time with family, no matter how hurt he was or how much a pain in the butt the trip was. And Dad passed away the night before March Madness started. And since the accident happened and he couldn't navigate like the online bracket system, one of my favorite annual pastimes was our phone call where I'd talk through all the matchups and he'd tell me who would win each round. And the last thing I ever texted my dad was if he needed bracket help. And it sounds insane, but that was really vintage us. And I love the little moments that I'm sure Gabriel and Daniel could speak to this too, but just the little moments we had with him like that are some things we'll cherish forever. And finally, the mandatory Bruce Springsteen quote is, Bruce Springsteen sang in Rosalita, "Someday we'll look back on this and it will all be funny. Thank you, Dad, for living your best, hilarious, and engaging life. We love you, Dad."
When you work in congregational life long enough, as the rabbi and I have, One of the sad things is you say goodbye to people whom you've known and loved for a long time. And it's par for the course. I have to say, when the rabbi called me a few days ago and told me the news of Rick's death, I've been shocked. I was shocked in a way I had not been in a long time, as many of us were, I know. I've known Rick and his family, Carol and the boys, and by extension, his siblings, his parents. I didn't know Carol's family so well, but I've met all of them today, and they're also wonderful, warm people, and I've been the beneficiary of the Friedman family's warmth and love for many, many, many years. Rick was, very interestingly, before his accident, when he would be in a group, his presence would be there, but he was not a talker. He was more of a listener in a large group. And I would always see that smile that showed up, and every once in a while he would throw in a quip that was very, very funny. But by and large, he was a listener. I don't know that I've heard him say in so many years, in those years before, 100 words in a group. And I was with him many times in a group. After his accident, I don't think I ever heard him where he wasn't talking. It was really a shift. And of course, there was the requisite, he would say all the Bruce Springsteen lyrics of probably every album in one sitting. And he would tell you the jokes. And sometimes the jokes were funny, and sometimes they were corny. But more than a few times, he was profound. He would chime in with something that would just make you think and make you feel. He was very well turned out. When he got dressed up, Rick had a penchant for French cuffs, I remember, and like cufflinks. And he had these beautiful suits and beautiful Allen Edmonds shoes. He had these raincoats. And I asked him once, where do you get all your clothes? He said, I have a guy who sells them from the back of his car. And he did. You know, Rick was smart, he was also clever, he knew every angle. I also attended the Springsteen concerts with him and Cubs games. I remember one such Cub game when there were 4 of us who went with Rick, and he used the handicap accessible seats. And for some reason there was a glitch, and the rest of us were not able to sit in this area. We said, okay, we'll sit somewhere else, and Rick would not have it. So I remember there was a backpack that was thrown over the fence to each successive person while we entered with whatever ticket was in the backpack, the same ticket, and we all sat in that section. So Rick knew everything. He and Carol, but we're a big part of this place, and he was at almost every service, every event. I'll miss him terribly. He was a good friend, and as David, as you said, his fierce independence was an inspiration to all, to never give up and to live life each day until the end, and that's what Rick did.
There's some things that I got to learn about Rick during our conversations as we were planning for today. Like the fact that Kay and David, who knew him his entire life, from the beginning to the end. And that the sacred spaces in your family were places like Congregation Judea Mitzvah and Habonim and Camp Tavor and Kibbutz Ginnigar and Workshop 28. And Sleepy Hollow in Michigan. And of course we all knew, okay, how many people here went to a Bruce Springsteen concert with Rick? Raise your hand. Or a Cubs game? Or a JRC Minion service? Or a JRC any other service? Or on a bike ride? So many events. Rick was the fun one in his family, which should not be a surprise to most of us. He and Carol met at Bradley University in 1982 when he was an undergrad and she was a professor, but not his teacher. Let's be very clear about that. They met at Hillel, which should surprise no one, and they decided to get married, which you may or may not know, on the steps of the old synagogue in Amsterdam, where they decided they would have a big Jewish family. And it was at their cousin Vanessa's bat mitzvah that they fell in love with JRC in 1988, just after they got married in 1987 in Columbus, and decided this would become their home, and wow, has it become your home. Not only when Aaron came in 1988 and Gabriel in 1990 and Daniel in 92, this has been the spot for all of your life cycles, your bar mitzvahs, some of the weddings that were not in other states or other countries. But this has been the sacred space of gathering. It has been the place that has brought you and all of us together. The place that we all saw Rick's determination, his energy, how he was loving and thoughtful and fun, where we experienced his humor, his remarkable memory, his insistence and his persistence, and his presence. We saw so many obstacles in his life, obstacles that were here, but also that were overcome so he could just be here. We saw him as a community become a father, become a grandfather in the living room at your home to celebrate as you became parents, and as he became Papa Rick for the first time. Rick was always here, and I always think of him as a fixture. One of the things that Carol brought with today was a keychain that had tzitzit tied around it that we made at Shavuot several years ago. And I remember a conversation that we had sitting in the back of the social hall, in which he said, I can't wear a talit really much anymore. It's too cumbersome, too much fabric, too much to wrap around. And at the point in which we get to the Shema, where we wrap the tzitzit around and gather them together, symbolizing that we bring the four corners of our people together, I can't do that anymore. He said, so I take my 4 fingers and I hold them in my hand. So I bring everybody together. That's what Rick did. So when you are here, whether you're wearing a talit, whether you are here for a service, whether you are schmoozing, whether you are praying, whether you're telling jokes, whether you're going to the Cubs game, whether you're listening to Springsteen, I invite you to think about taking 4 fingers in your hand and holding them together. Because the idea of connecting, of showing up, of being together is what we are here to do. In so many ways. When it's easy, when it's fun like Purim, and when it's hard and it's heartbreaking like today. When it's traumatic and we showed up 22 years ago. And in this moment, when everybody knows exactly what to do and exactly where to be. And in the coming days and weeks and months, when we will also know exactly where to be, but sometimes need the reminder that showing up for Carol and all of your extended family is exactly where we need to continue to be as a community. Rick was here. He came to the blood drive. He couldn't give blood, but there were donuts. And his friends were here. He came to the Megillah reading. He came to hear the altar rockers and to watch the spiel and to sit at the table and to laugh and to tell some good jokes. At the Shiva today, we will gather, and I invite you to tell your favorite Rick stories to each other, to tell whatever it is that comes to your mind that maybe you've heard 1,000 times, but the person next to you has only heard it 999. To invite each other to show up together, to pull yourself up and sit down. In the coming days, Carol is going to go to Boston to be with Gabriel and Thúy-Lan and Levi and Noa and spend some time with her family there. And then when you come back, we will still be here for you. It is hard to not have closure, but the reality is sometimes we don't get that. But we get to have a community that continues to be here, continues to show up, continues to come and fill this room and fill this space. And so we will remember Rick's memory. We will bless the fact that his neshama, his essence, his soul, is not constrained in the body that worked so very hard to continue to hold it for so many years, and that that body is no longer suffering or struggling, despite how determined and persistent it was to continue to be here. El Malei Rachamim is the prayer we chant that invites release and freedom for the neshama, the soul, the breath, the essence of our dear friend, Rick Friedman, and invites all of us to gather all of the love we have together and to bless it for its release, that his memory may come to land in our broken hearts. Please rise in body or in spirit to the chanting of El Malei Rachamim.
El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Lamramim, Ametzem Nechelefon Natachat Kanpeh Hashchina, B'malot Kedoshim Utechorim, Kizohar HaRakim Mazhirim, Et Nishmat Reuven ben Hershel B'Tova, Shehalach Le'olamo. Ono Barachamim Hastirehu, B'Seter Kanfecha Le'olamim. Utzeror B'Yitzror HaChaim Et Nishmato. Adonai hu nachalato, v'yanuach v'shalom al mishkamo, v'nomar Amen.
God, filled with compassion, dwelling in the heavens' heights, bring proper rest beneath the wings of your Shekhinah, amid the ranks of the holy and the pure, illuminating like the brilliance of the skies, the soul of Rick Friedman, who has gone to his eternal place of rest. May you, who are the source of compassion, shelter him beneath your wings eternally and bind his soul among the living, that he may rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. We remain standing together as we recite Mourner's Kaddish for Rick. We recite together these words of this prayer. We know it so many times. We have said it for our beloveds, and we say it in memory of the goodness, the holiness that exists in the universe, and the goodness and the holiness that existed in our friend Rick. Yitgadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah, Ve'alma divrach hirutei ve'amlich malchutei, v'chayeton u'merechon u'chayei v'kol beit Yisrael, v'galav v'zman kari v'imru amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam olamei amaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yithaleh v'yithalal Shmei kedusha v'richu, le'elam mikol berchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'yakamata, damiran ve'alma v'imru amen. Yehei Shlama Rabbah min Shmaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom v'imrama, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen. Oseh shalom, shalom, shalom v'imrama, hu yaseh shalom, say shalom, shalom, shalom bimromav. Uyaseh shalom aleinu. Ve'kol Yisrael, ve'kol yoshvei tevel, ve'yilu amen. Zichrono livracha. May Rick's memory be a blessing. We invite you to remain standing. Many of you may know the custom when we are at a cemetery that those who are supporting the mourners form two lines, and as the mourners are leaving the cemetery, they form a column of support, a column that the mourners walk through so that as they leave the cemetery and move from the gravesite to heading back to their home, they are surrounded only by the loving faces of those who are there to support them. And we're going to do that now. So I invite everyone to turn where you are right now and face the center aisles so that we form a loving column of support and love, so that before we move to the Shiva that will take place in the back of the room, that Carol and Aaron and Daniel and Gabriel and David and Beth and your entire family, all of the Neubauers and the Friedmans and all of the extended family can walk through and see all of you, see your love and care for Rick, but more importantly in this moment for them, to know Hamakom Yinachem Etchem, may the source of all comfort all of you, B'toch Sha'ar Avelei Tzion, amongst all of those, amongst our people who are mourning now and in this tender moment, and bring you comfort and love.